I want to talk about when I finally started getting buyer rep agreements. It took me a lot of years in the business before I started getting them, so kudos to Jennifer back there, because I know she started early getting them. I resisted getting them for a long time because I thought, there's no way the buyers will sign this. I'll lose a bunch of clients if I ask for it. People don't want to come and sit down in the office and talk to me. They just want to see homes. Like, I had all these reasons why I couldn't get them. And then one day I had a friend who really pissed me off. So have any of y'all ever worked with friends as clients? And we all know that they're like the perfect clients, right? They never do anything that's annoying. Well, so this particular friend, I took him out and showed him a bunch of condos. And we did not have a buyer rep signed, because at that point I thought, you don't need these and nobody will sign them. So I took him out and showed him a bunch of stuff. He finally picked a condo that he went under contract for. And we got toward like the end of the option period, and suddenly he terminated this contract on me. And he said, you know what, my parents were gonna give me the money for this down payment, and now they've had a change in their circumstances, and so they're not giving me the money anymore, and I'm so sorry, but I have to terminate this transaction. And at the time, I thought, okay, well, you know, that sucks. I really needed that commission, but I get it, this happens, right? Sometimes deals just don't work out, and we gotta get back up and move on with our businesses. So that wasn't the part that pissed me off. At that point, I just felt bad for him, because I thought he really liked this condo and he really wanted to buy it. Now he doesn't get to, and I wonder, I hope everything's okay with his parents. I mean, God forbid, what happened? Did their business go under or something? Right, so that's what I'm thinking. So I go to a party about maybe, Chris, you were there with me, this was maybe like 5 weeks later, 4 weeks, 5 weeks later, we go to a Super Bowl party, and we're sitting there, and my friend says to me, hey Isabel, I bought a house. And I said, what? Like, when are you closing? And he said, oh, I just closed. So quick math told me he terminated this contract, immediately went under contract on something else, and then closed on it. So I'm thinking to myself, not only did he terminate this contract on me, put me through all this work, he clearly lied to me about his reason for terminating, and then proceeded to go under contract with some other agent, some other part of town, and to get to closing with them. Well, it turned out that his parents had partly been the reason why he had made the switch. Apparently, one thing we never talked about was that they had a license in another state, and they wanted a referral fee. They never asked me. This conversation was never had. They picked some other agent and said, you have to work with this one because they're going to pay us a referral fee. So I was very mad at that point, and I was thinking to myself, I was having some rather petty revenge scenarios going through my head, like, you know what, I'm going to throw really cool housewarming parties and he's not going to be invited, you know, things like that. But what I was really interested in, less so than getting revenge, was figuring out how to make sure that this didn't happen to me anymore. Because it was painful for me, it was a lot of work, and it was possibly a threat to my relationship with my friends. And I didn't ever want to have this happen with a friend or with anybody else ever again. So, for those of you who work with buyers, I think you'll sympathize with me when I say this, that there are a couple of things that I really hate when working with buyers. And that is, I hate being ghosted by buyers, where you're taking somebody around town, you do all this work, and then suddenly they go silent on you. I hate having buyers freak out during the transaction because they don't know what's going on, and they're confused, and they're stressed and overwhelmed, and they're freaking out and yelling at you on the phone, all those kind of things. I hate when that happens. And I also hate when transactions fall apart because something goes wrong and suddenly we're terminating this transaction because this buyer didn't understand lending, or they didn't understand the option period, or whatever. So I'm seeing heads nodding, so I'm assuming that y'all feel this way too. Those are not fun things to have happen. So what I have found is that by doing the buyer presentation and the buyer meeting and getting a buyer rep signed, I can prevent, not always, but I can prevent most of these things from happening most of the time. So why don't we do a quick role play of how I do a buyer presentation meeting, just like the beginning of it, just to give y'all an overview. Would that be helpful? Y'all are going to be a very large group of buyers who just came into the office and sat down at the conference table. So thank you guys so much for coming in today. I'm really excited to get to sit down with you. So this is exciting that you're moving to Austin. Yeah, awesome.
We need a really big house.
Yeah, you do get a really big house. There's a lot of people that are sitting here today. So how was traffic getting over here? Did you have any issues finding it or anything? Everything good? Okay, cool. Well, so let's get down to business, because I know y'all have some places to be today, and I'd like to go eat lunch after this. So let's get started. Is that good with you guys? Yeah. Great. So as we're getting started together, the first thing that I want to let you know is that I'm not here to talk you into buying a house today. And I'm not here to talk you into buying a house with me. What's really important to me is that we have a chance to sit down together and make sure that I understand what it is that you're after, and that we have a chance to decide, do we think that we would enjoy doing some work together? And if the answer to that question is yes, then at the end of this meeting, we'll do the paperwork that we need to do to get started, and we'll head out into the marketplace if it's time for us to go look at some homes today. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So there's a 6-step process that I take every buyer through to make sure that everything gets covered. The first thing is that I would like to ask you some questions. I want to make sure that I totally understand what it is that you need and what you're after, so that I can tell you if I can help you achieve those goals or not. So when we do this, I'm going to take a bunch of notes. I'm going to have a bunch of questions to ask you guys. Would that be all right?
Yep.
Perfect. The second thing I'd like to do is talk about how buyer's agency works in Texas. What does it mean to have a real estate agent represent your interests? And we'll go over a form that'll help me explain that. Step number 3 is to talk just real quickly about our team structure. So when we get here, I'm not going to spend all day talking about myself because that would be boring. So we'll just go over real quickly, how is my team structured? What days do we take off? What should you know about working with us? Just a few things that if we do decide to work together, you'll have a good understanding of what it's like to work with us. Step number 4 is to talk about offers and negotiations. Now, particularly for first-time buyers, now this is y'all's first time buying in Austin, right? Cool. So especially if you're a first-time buyer, I find that people really appreciate this. What I'll do is I'll take you through a timeline of what happens from the time that you find a house that you like until you actually sit down at the closing table and buy it. So we'll talk about when do you write checks, when do inspections happen, when can you get out of the contract if you need to. We'll go over all that stuff. Do you think that would be helpful for you guys?
Yep.
Yes. Awesome. You know, one reason I find that this is so helpful is because when you do actually find a home that you like, I want you to kind of know what's going to happen next. It'll just help everything be a little bit less stressful for you. Step number 5 is we'll talk about properties. So I know you guys have been looking online. You've sent me a few links so we can talk about those. We'll also pop open my laptop and look at homes that fit the criteria that you've told me you want, so that you can just kind of see what's out there. And then if we can get through all of that efficiently, then we should be in a good position to do step number 6, which is for us to make a mutual decision together. Is it a good time for you to buy, and do we want to do some work together? And if the answer is yes, then we'll go through the forms that we need to make that happen. Is there any problem with following that process, or does that sound good to everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay, awesome. Okay, break the role play. What did y'all think about that?
That's good.
Good.
Yeah. Great.
Information.
Is this something you show them, like a document, or you do like a PowerPoint? I mean, are you actually showing them this?
I do show them this.
Yes, yeah.
Because I think it's helpful for people to see it. I sometimes just write it. I most often just write it on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Like I'll just have a
Right.
sheet of paper with me and just write it out. Same with when I get to offers and negotiations. Most often I'll just write that out on a sheet of paper. So I want to talk a little bit about why this is structured this way. And by the way, I can't take credit for this. This comes from a sales coach that I've worked with. This is basically verbatim his process. So I was taught this by someone else. The way that I present it may change a little bit just depending on the vibe that I'm getting from the clients, but pretty much I just follow exactly what I just did. The reason that this is set up the way that it is because this is aligned with the anatomy of any kind of a sales interaction. So the anatomy of any good sales interaction is, and you guys may be familiar with this. Number 1, take control. Number 2, find the problem. Number 3, solve the problem. Number 4, close. Ryan, you've gone through this before. Isn't this like on Curator or something?
Yeah.
They have a version of
Yeah.
this? Yeah, I think there's some sales training floating around the company that already has this incorporated into it, so I don't think that this is news to all of y'all. But if this is news to you, then I would recommend that you start chanting this 5 times a day until it's like memorized.
One thing I'd say that you did in your role play is the check-in. You know, where you ask them questions, that makes sense. You understand?
Yep.
You know, which you obviously did.
Right, absolutely. Which, if we want to get into really deep into the sales stuff, those are like trial closes, basically, along the way. So, take control, find the problem, solve the problem, close. That's how you set up any sales call, any sales interaction is going to be a shorter or a longer version. Phone call might be short, longer, sit down buyer rep might be longer, it might take you an hour. But anytime you're in a sales interaction, if you're following this, then you're going to have a lot more success in getting to closing. So if you're on the phone, you're closing for an appointment. If you're in a meeting, you're closing for the paperwork to be signed. If you can present yourself as the solution to the problem that you have uncovered, then it's a whole lot easier to close. So in terms of the 6-step process, here's how it's broken down. And is this in the way? Can you all see this?
Yeah, that's
okay. Good. Okay, so what I do when I sit down with buyers is first I present the 6-step process, and then I go back and do each step. So here's how it's broken down. When I sit them down in the office and tell them what to expect from this meeting, that's the take control step. Generally speaking, if you can present to someone, here's our agenda, and they agree to that, you have now taken control of the interaction, right? It's pretty hard at that point for them to refuse to follow this process. Most people just won't. Occasionally you'll meet people who have the personality type where they kind of want to be difficult and they might try to pull you off track. But for the most part, it's amazing how much power laying out a 6-step process in front of someone has for them to then follow this with you. So it avoids situations where you've just sat them down and suddenly they're peppering you with questions. Well, what about this property? Can we go see this today? What's going on here? Can I see comps for this? And you're like, whoa, it's not even time for us to talk about that yet. You can keep them on track. So you take control by presenting to them, here's what's going to happen today. And you get their agreement that they're good with that. Then the ask question step is where you're finding their problem. You're trying to understand what's their timeline, what's their money situation, where's their down payment coming from, what challenges might there be, what kind of house do they want, is this house and this price point realistic for where they want to be? They're telling you they want to be in Central Austin for $300,000 with a yard and 3 bedrooms, then you might already know, okay, this is going to be tough. And you all can already start to figure out, okay, where are their problems going to be that I can help solve? Then these steps in the middle, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are all the solve the problem steps. So you're showing how you and your company and your experience are a solution to the problems that you have uncovered that they have. Then by the time you get done with that, you'll be in a good position, number one, for you to decide if you want this client. Because at this point, you know what's their budget, what's their situation, how long have they been looking. I mean, if you start asking questions and you find out that they've been looking all over Austin for 4 years with a bunch of different agents and they haven't picked anything, they've seen 400 homes, maybe you don't want this client. And that's totally fine. If you found out they're on a tight timeline, they've got enough money, they're motivated, and they understand what's going on and they're ready to move forward, then great. And you guys can then go through the forms and get that signed. Okay, so the reason I started doing these with buyers was because I was tired of feeling like I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off with no loyalty, no clarity, no control. That was just driving me crazy. So that was why I initially started doing them. But at this point, I've gotten to a point where I do them with every single buyer that I work with. I will not put a buyer in my car until this meeting has been done and forms have been signed. The reason I started was because there were problems that I was trying to solve in my own business. But the reason that I have kept doing them is because of the feedback that I've gotten from buyers. So the longer I've done these, the more I hear things like this from buyers. I feel way more comfortable going into this purchase. Thank you so much for taking this time to sit down with me. And when that first started happening, I was shocked by that feedback from buyers because I thought asking people to come into the office is a burden. Asking people to come into the office is something that they just won't do. But the more I do this, the more buyers look at me and they say, I feel so comfortable. Like, I really understand what's going on, and I'm so grateful that you had us come in and sit down today. So I've just built this inner conviction that this is the right way to do things, that not only does it make your business easier, it makes buyers way more likely to get to the closing table and to be happier when they do. So that's all I got.
Do you also do it remotely if they don't want to come into the office?
I've done video once.
Yeah. But you don't.
Although, I don't really, I'll do video ones if they live out of town. I am not particularly willing to do them just because they don't want to come in.
Will you go to their home or no? You prefer the office?
No, I mean, I'm pretty big on people coming into the office, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a safety thing for me. If it's not a personal relationship, if it's like a stranger, I don't want to be meeting somewhere on their turf the first time. I think it's important to have them come into the office for just a safety thing. The second reason is because I've also learned that that is one thing that's important to me to qualify this person. If they're serious about buying a home, they'll make the time to come to the office. So when I have somebody on the phone who says, yeah, I might want to buy, I might be interested in more information. Oh no, I just can't come in. I just can't make that work. I'm so busy. Well, if you're committed, you'll find a way, and if you're not, you'll find an excuse. And that's what I consider that to be.
Okay.
You know, and I've had some buyers that I've stayed in touch with for years, and you know, sent them a property every once in a while, checked in every once in a while. After 2 years of that, they're like, okay, I'm ready to meet you. I've got a meeting next week that's that way. That's a friend. She's like, okay, we're ready to come in. We're ready to come into the office. That's kind of my way of making sure that they're serious enough.